Are journalists above the law? What even is the freedom of the press? And why did the constitutional authors feel the need to protect it in the First Amendment? How has the freedom of the press evolved as technology has over the last 200 plus years since it was codified in the Constitution? Welcome to Knowledge is Power, a video series where we are taking a close look at the First Amendment. In this video, we'll be looking at the freedom of the press, which considers what the press is and whether or not it should be protected within the First Amendment. If you'll recall, last week we did a deep dive into freedom of speech. This week, we're taking a closer look at freedom of the press. Hi, I'm Jenny, and I went to law school so you don't have to. My favorite classes in law school were constitutional law. In this series, we're taking an in-depth look at the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and considering what it protects and what it doesn't. The disclaimers: you cannot use this information in a court of law. This is not legal advice. You cannot use it to defend your shitty take if you are prosecuted. And you will not be able to pass your Con Law 1 exam after this video. The First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of the press, that's the part we're looking at this week, or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for the redress of grievances. So where did we start? And how did we get to where we are today? Are we in an utter constitutional crisis? And is the freedom of press under attack? Spoiler alert, the answer to most of these is quite simply yes. So when I was researching a little bit about freedom of the press, of course I wanted to start with what is the press? How is it defined? How has it been defined over the years? What was happening at the time the Constitution was written? Etc. One thing that kept coming up over and over and over again was this reference to the Fourth Estate. I didn't know what that was exactly. I've heard it referenced, not super familiar with it, so I did a little deep dive. Follow me down the rabbit hole. What is the Fourth Estate, and why is it called that? Remember, the U.S. Constitution was being written around the same time as the French Revolution, which modernized government structure. Out with the old royalty and monarchies, in with new, more democratic processes. Under this new structure, common people had more rights and more of a say in how they were governed. So in pre-revolutionary France, pre-1789, and in 18th century Britain, there were 4 estates. One was the clergy, including bishops, priests, and other church officials. They had significant wealth, power, and privileges, like being exempt from having to pay taxes. Sound familiar? The second estate was nobility, aristocrats, members of the royal family, what have you. They also had significant power and influence and wealth, and were exempt from paying taxes as well. They also had access to high power positions within the government and significant political influence. Again, this is ringing with familiarity. The third estate was commoners, which made up somewhere between 97 and 98% of the total population. This included everyone from wealthy merchants, lawyers, to urban workers and peasants. They bore the biggest tax burden and had rather limited political power. And again, this is feeling all too familiar. The fourth estate was journalists and the press. They wielded significant influence over public opinion through their reporting on what was happening within the parliaments. Today, the fourth estate is used as another check and balance on the 3 branches of government. It's a powerful tool for informing citizens, holding government and its institutions accountable. The fifth estate is a more modern theory that encompasses non-traditional contemporary media like bloggers and YouTubers and podcasts. The fifth estate can hold institutions accountable and amplify marginalized voices, but it can also be the purveyor of much misinformation and disinformation. See Joe Rogan, Charlie Kirk, etc. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. So that's what was happening when the Constitution and Bill of Rights were being written. Let's take a look at how freedom of the press has been shaped by the Supreme Court case law in the years since then, and later we'll take a look at where we are today. Imagine you're an investigative journalist. You expose corruption, publish the story. Next thing you know, the mayor's lawyers are in your inbox. The judge wants your notes, and your accountant is screaming about a press tax. Does the First Amendment swoop in like a caped crusader to save you? Or does it shrug and say, good luck, kid? Today we're digging into one of the most misunderstood parts of the Bill of Rights, freedom of the press. And if you think this is just about newspapers, think again. It's about podcasts, Substackers, and even the guy live streaming city council drama on YouTube. Spoiler alert, it's about to get messy. Quick question. Does the press clause give journalists special privileges? Like a constitutional backstage pass? The Supreme Court's answer over and over again is basically, not exactly. The press doesn't get superpowers, but government can't put kryptonite in their coffee either. So the rule of thumb is, no special privileges, but also no special punishments. Treat the press like everyone else, but never worse. The heart of press freedom is protection from the government, from censorship, from licensing, intimidation, or sneaky laws designed to chill speech. This kind of ties in with what we covered last week. If a law specifically hits journalists, boom, red flag. That is a constitutional problem. But if it's a neutral law that everyone has to follow, that's usually fair game. The court loves what it calls laws of general applicability. We'll see that theme a lot. The press gets to shout the truth from the rooftops, but it still has to obey the noise ordinance. We're going to next take a look at taxes on the press and consider whether they are still relevant with Minneapolis Star and Tribune versus Minnesota. In the 1980s, Minnesota tried to tax the ink and paper used by newspapers. The Supreme Court said, nice try, unconstitutional. Because targeting the press is basically taxing the right to publish. If the government can financially muzzle the watchdog, it's not a free press. It's a house pet. Fast forward to today, the same rule applies. Any modern media fee or special licensing costs triggers those same warning sirens. Okay, twist time. What if the law isn't about the press, but still bites them? In Cohen versus Cowles Media Company, reporters promised confidentiality to a source. Then they broke that promise. He sued under the ordinary law of promissory estoppel. It's a legal doctrine that basically says a promise is a promise. The journalists argued, we're the press, First Amendment. The Supreme Court said, cute, but you're still liable. The lesson from this is that the First Amendment does not make you immune from contracts, libel suits, or parking tickets. General laws apply to everyone, even Pulitzer winners. One of journalism's holy grails is protecting sources. But in Brainsburg versus Hayes in 1972, the Supreme Court said that reporters don't have a constitutional right to refuse a grand jury subpoena. Ouch. Since then, states have built their own shield laws. 49 of them, in fact. But there is no federal shield law. After 2005, we've seen reporters like James Risen or Catherine Herridge face subpoenas over confidential sources. Congress has flirted with the Federal Free Flow of Information Act, but it keeps dying quietly in committee. So yes, you can protect your sources until you can't. Next up, can the government make you give equal airtime? We saw this in the 2024 election cycle. In the 1960s, Red Lion versus FCC said the FCC could require fairness on broadcast radio because airwaves are scarce. But when Florida told newspapers they had to print replies from political candidates, the Supreme Court in Miami Herald versus Tornillo said, absolutely not. That's forced speech, and it violates editorial independence. So broadcasters once had fairness rules. Print and online media do not. And in the YouTube era, we're still arguing. Are platforms the new broadcasters or private publishers? Here's where the press goes on the offense. Can journalists demand access to government spaces? In Richmond newspapers versus Virginia, the court said that criminal trials must generally be open because openness is essential to justice. But, and this is key, the press has no greater right than the public. If you or I can't walk in, neither can the New York Times. Today, that plays out with remote hearings and live streams. Some judges love transparency. Others worry about turning trials into TikToks. We're seeing this even further in the spotlight today, as the Department of Defense is requiring an oath of loyalty for publishing anything, even unclassified information, from the press. Today's media is stepping up and fighting back, including Pete Hegseth's previous employer, Fox News, which, arguably, is not official press, but instead an entertainment corporation, as many media outlets have refused to sign the loyalty oath. We're even seeing this come up a little bit at the White House, with a press secretary who's about as transparent as a brick wall. Reporters often asked to film inside prisons, and courts still say, you don't have a special right to do that. In Pell versus Procunier, a case from 1974, and Hutchins versus KQED from 1978, the court held that prison officials control access. The First Amendment does not override security rules. After 2005, the same logic kept reporters out of Guantanamo Bay and Supermax units. So transparency depends on policy, not on constitutional magic words. Since 2005, when I graduated law school, we've had some smaller but mighty moments in freedom of the press. U.S. versus Quattrone was a case heard in the Second Circuit in 2005. A court struck down a gag order on juror information. We've seen courts experiment with live streams, especially during COVID, where we were conducting Zoom court, basically. And Congress keeps proposing the Sunshine in the Courtroom Act, which would allow cameras into federal courts. The battlefield today is not in paper and ink, it's in bandwidth and access. And if we look at the freedom of press today, we see it under full attack. So, that's how we got where we are today. And yet, we continue to face ongoing challenges in this fairly simple notion. Since 2016, Trump has been working to invalidate the press, chipping away at its legitimacy. By using terms like fake news and only permitting certain media outlets into the White House press room, he's been trying to reshape the Fifth Estate into the Fourth Estate. And with the ever-narrowing media conglomerates that continue to shape the press landscape today, freedom of the press is taking on a much narrower meaning. We see this in conglomerates like Paramount's sale to Skydance and the subsequent cancellation of Late Night with Stephen Colbert. We also see this in the sale of TikTok to Larry Ellison, who owns Oracle, a big tech company. We're also seeing this with billionaires like Rupert Murdoch buying up the Wall Street Journal or Jeff Bezos buying up the Washington Post. The billionaires are buying up media outlets so that they can rewrite history in real time. We also see this with the FCC pressuring local affiliate stations to stop carrying things like Jimmy Kimmel Live. But do these situations fall more under freedom of speech or freedom of the press? Either way, they're protected under the First Amendment, as we've seen in recent episodes within this series. We see this when ICE detained and deported Sami Hamdi, a British political commentator, earlier this week. We saw this when ICE detained a WGN reporter last month. We also see this when biased journalists like Barry Weiss are installed as editor-in-chief at CBS, a legendary news outlet. I'm sure Walter Cronkite is turning over in his grave. The constitutional authors never conceived that technology would shape the way we consume media the way it has today. In 1789, newspapers were barely a thing. Certainly, newspapers and journals that we were familiar with today were not available in the 18th century. We've come so far within the last century alone with the rise of television, modern journalism, and the internet. The technology we have available today raises the question: if the fourth estate is to provide us an additional check and balance on the branches of government, why isn't it doing so? We see so much of the power of the judiciary and legislature being simply handed over to the executive branch. So, where does that leave journalists? So, after all that, are journalists above the law? Not even close. They just can't be singled out for punishment. The First Amendment does not make the press invincible. It makes it possible. It gives reporters breathing room to ask tough questions, to annoy the powerful, to chase truth in uncomfortable places. And that is what keeps democracy breathing too. Although with the challenges that every facet of the First Amendment faces today, that breathing is more of a full-blown asthma attack. So next time you see a reporter standing in the rain outside a courthouse, remember, they're not just waiting for a quote, they're exercising the very freedom that keeps the rest of us informed. And if you believe in the free press, hit subscribe, share this video, and for the love of all that is constitutional, support local journalism. And don't forget to vote next Tuesday. Democracy dies in silence, but it thrives on good editing. In this video, we looked at freedom of the press, why the constitutional authors felt the need to protect it, how it is enshrined into the U.S. Constitution, and how it has been protected in the years since the Constitution became the governing structure of the land. If you like this video, please like and leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts on freedom of the press, or whether you have any questions. Next week, we'll be taking a look at the freedom of assembly, so be sure to subscribe to be notified when we post that video. And be sure to watch last week's video where we discussed freedom of speech. That was a long one. My apologies. Let me know. I'm considering a couple of different things after we get through next week with freedom of assembly. Let me know if you'd be interested in potentially either going back to more gin and tonic-y specific things, or if you want to stay on the First Amendment and we can discuss, other things. We can certainly break down last week's super long video. The week before is about freedom of free exercise. Last week's was free speech. Those are both really long videos. We can break those down, kind of see how everything plays together or not, etc. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. Until next week, I'm Jen. Thanks for joining me. Remember, every accusation is a confession. Free Palestine, and we still have not seen the full Epstein files yet.